The views expressed in this program do not necessarily reflect those of this station.
Welcome to Insights into Northeast Michigan, a WBKB News public affairs program. Insights deals with the issues affecting those in the community as well as Northeast Michigan and the state. And now, Insights into Northeast Michigan.
Welcome to Insights. I'm Asia Suber, and today I am here with the building official, Don Gilman, on the geese migration here in Alpena and also the goose hunt that's coming up. How are you doing today?
Real good. How you doing?
I'm doing good. Thank you for joining us.
All right, thanks for having me.
So tell me, what is going on with this goose hunt? Why are the geese flocking here?
Well, the geese flock here. Some of them flock here, some of them were born here. And those would be your local giant Canadian geese. They flock here because the city maintains our grass, which is one of their primary food sources, and water is something else they need to survive, so because we have so much of it. And you look at the manicured lawns in the park, so that's what attracts them. So we have one population, you know, like in the wildfowl sanctuary, a lot of them nest, and then along the beaches, behind the cement plant, over in the marshes by Mishikiwas. And, you know, they raise their young there, and then when they get big enough to fly, they all come to town. And so out at some of the other lakes like Long Lake and Grand Lake, you know, the local inland lakes, they'll have a population too. And then as the population gets too big, they start to compete for the same food. So with the football fields at the high school, the cemetery, I mean, Alpena's on a limited supply of grass, which is about all they need to eat when the weather's warm. They need something else when it's cold. But so basically we look at controlling the population and keeping it manageable.
And speaking of population, what have you seen this year? Has the numbers increased? Have they decreased? What are you seeing?
Well, the more modern goose control hunt has been going on for the last 3 or 4 years. And so since the first year and the second year, the population declined a little bit. Last year, there weren't as many geese as there were the 2 previous years. This year, however, probably due to high water levels and really excellent nesting conditions. There's right now, with mostly what we would call the local population, there's probably about 200, 250 in town at least, and that's twice as many as there were at this time last year.
Wow, that is an increase. And what do you plan on doing about this issue?
We're going to kill them.
And with killing them, can you explain what do you mean by that?
Yes. So what we do to control the issue, we start out in the spring with the personnel at our Department of Public Works have been trained to go out and do what's called nest destruction and egg collection. So this year they went to about 20 nests and collected 123 or 124 eggs, which they turn into the DNR. And there's real specific criteria for if they can take the egg out of the nest or not. It has to be just like an egg like you'd buy at the store, you know, that you're going to eat. If they pick it up and they wiggle it and maybe the goose is formed in it, then they leave it. But they collect the eggs and destroy the nest because typically, if that occurs in a Canadian goose, what they do if they don't have their nest anymore, they leave and they fly all the way to Canada, to St. James Bay off the Hudson Bay, the big Hudson Lake up there, and they stay there all summer. And if a goose does not successfully find a mate in the spring to have a nest with, they will fly up there too. That's just what they do. And so then they'll stay up there all summer, and during the summer they molt or they shed their flight feathers. And so for a brief period of time, for a couple of weeks, young geese obviously don't have feathers yet enough to fly. The mature geese have lost their flight feathers, so they can't fly. The minute they get them back, that's when they start migrating back south. And so that's typically starting about now through the end of September. That's when the geese will start coming. So what happens, we have a resident population of Canada geese that stay here all the time. And they're not exactly like other waterfowl and other just songbirds and things that you see all summer and then they're gone all winter because they migrate to South America or, you know, South Carolina where you came from, or Florida or someplace, Mexico like that. The giant Canada geese migrate as far as the water till they hit the first place that has open water, and then they'll stay there. So In Michigan, a lot of times up here, the lake will freeze or the rivers will freeze, so they'll go, but they're probably only going down as far as Lansing. So the state of Michigan, the Department of Natural Resources, has a target number of what they think is a healthy population of geese overall within the state. And we have an idea of what's a healthy population of geese in the city of Alpena so that we can still enjoy them, you know, and view them. But we don't want to have as many bad encounters between humans and geese. They can be territorial when they're raising their young, as anybody that's been on the bike path and riding your bike or walking or taking your dog, and they have little geese, and that, you know, you're between them and the water, their escape route. The Canada geese will get kind of aggressive. I mean, they're not gonna hurt you too bad. I mean, they're gonna scare you or scare your kids because they come hissing at you with their neck stuck out and stuff like that. But so we try to, you know, find that balance through several means. The one mean that's the most economical actually is this time of year, because the legal seasons are open, is to harvest some of them. And so that's exactly what we do. And we do that by hunting just the way that everybody around here that hunts geese, you know, you go out in a farm field and you put out some decoys and you call them and try to get them to come and land and fly by you so you can get a shot at them. We do the same thing.
It's the same way. And now, do you believe this is going against animal rights?
No, well, my belief is, you know, that God gave man dominion over the animals, and that's a responsibility that we have, not only to use animals wisely and treat them accordingly, but it's also to help maintain their health. So part of what happens in the wild, be it white-tailed deer, rabbits, fox, coyotes, whatever the wild animal is, sometimes through no fault of their own, someone will artificially inflate a food source. And so they have more food than what would normally occur naturally. And so when that happens, they flock to that food source. They're able, more of them survive, you know, with they're not starving to death or getting diseases or things like that until you get too many competing for that food source. And you know, the disease is evident because there's just so much of a mess that anybody who's been on the bike path knows what I'm talking about when I use the word mess, or around the boat harbor where they're getting up on the docks and things. So it creates a lot of issues. Dogs, you know, if your dog finds some goose scat in the grass and eats it, you know, there's a good chance they can get sick. You know, obviously it's just I mean, it's just chewed up grass, you know, but it's messy, and nobody, you know, you take your kids to the beach and you got to go through it. Nobody wants that tracked into the cars and all over the kids, and, you know, yuck. So, no, I don't think it goes against animal rights. I think that's a whole nother subject about the rights that animals have. I mean, obviously, I think humans have more rights right now than the geese do.
And we will continue this conversation with Don when we return. Welcome back to Insights. Before we get into the meeting that happened, the council meeting that happened this week, could you give us a history on geese and the migration here in Alpena?
Certainly. So we're having the goose hunt. We actually call it a goose control hunt because it's not set up like a typical goose hunt where the goal is to go out and shoot as many geese as you can, or every single goose that you can do. It's very programmed and specific to a couple sites that I believe will help to get the number of geese we need to get. And the particular geese we want to get are actually the ones that have been here all summer, not the ones that are just coming down from Canada, because they're probably going to keep on going anyway. But so back, I don't know, maybe 10 or so years ago, 12 years ago, the city came up with an idea of having a goose hunt. So what they did with the previous city manager and public safety director was they had a hunt, and they opened it up pretty much to everybody. And so they did it for a couple Fridays in September in conjunction with the early goose season. But actually what we did was we hunted the whole wildfowl sanctuary. So they went out in advance, the Department of Public Works, and they established places where guys would hide in the weeds with their boats and stuff, and along on the duck park, you know, the island, and probably set up about 18 blinds. And so there would be 30, 40 people signed up to do these hunts, and then they're all over the wildfowl sanctuary where all the rest of the wildlife are that we don't want to disturb, like the deer and the ducks and the beavers and muskrats and all that, and really disrupt things for a while. But anyway, we did manage to get, I think one year we got maybe 100 geese, sometimes it would be about 50, and it helped to control the population. And then we quit doing it because we also had to be mindful of the county fair. And like they're going to be in August this year, they started having it after Labor Day for some reason, or maybe it was right around Labor Day, and it's the first week of September. Well, that took out half of the available time to hunt with the early season, so we just quit doing it. And then it just never came up again. And so a few years ago, we started talking about with our current city manager and you know, how to control some of the geese. So that was something we looked at, and basically I just structured it differently. So what we do is we don't actually hunt in the wildfowl sanctuary. We'll have some hunters at the county fairgrounds on land on the ball fields, you know, in front of the grandstands. And then we'll have some fellas down at Mishkewis Beach. And so good hunters that hunt geese all the time. Because another thing we don't want is we don't want people taking iffy shots. And part of the problem with the previous hunt, you could be in your little duck boat with your decoys out waiting for these geese to come, and then they're 100 yards over the people next to you and they open fire on them. And that's really too far away to cleanly kill an animal. So sometimes they actually get wounded. And that still happens now, but not as bad. But then you've got them flying wherever and dying in somebody's backyard, or, you know, being sick on the river where everybody's going to see them. So the way the hunt is set up now is to try to control that from happening. So we can limit our ranges of shooting and, again, try to identify more of the big local geese that have been here all summer. So that's kind of, you know, the history of it. And I also, you know, my personal feelings, and I'm sure I speak for the city manager when I say we just thought some people feel bad enough or are opposed enough because they have the misconception that, you know, some guys are just going to be walking down to the beach with a shotgun and just walking up and chasing these geese and shooting them. That's nothing like that. They're hunted just in the normal fashion with people in a blind hiding with some decoys set out to get them to come into the appropriate range to be able to dispatch them cleanly. And nobody's running around with a shotgun just
just shooting. Well, that was my next question. Are the people that are shooting these birds, are they trained? Is there a training course that they have to go through?
No, they all went through hunter safety. We follow all the game laws of the state of Michigan. In other words, they have the proper licenses, and they're all guys that, like, I hunt geese aside from just this thing in the city. You know, I always have, you know, waterfowl and stuff. So they're people that I've hunted with that I feel comfortable with. When you hunt with people, you know, in the blinds, whether it's deer hunting or whatever you're doing, you know, you're only hunting with people that you feel are safe. Yeah. Because, you know, anytime you're around guns, they have to be handled properly. Because if they're not, accidents can happen. So the person, Tyler Lumpson, kind of takes the guys over to Mishkewis Beach, and he's done it the last few years, and we've hunted together. And so, like just today, I met with them, and we walked the ground and looked at it. And, you know, we set safety parameters up. So when geese are coming in, you're getting excited and everything, especially people that haven't hunted as much. You know, it's easy to start shooting at a goose and then forget where the muzzle is going. And the muzzle is the business end of that shotgun. So we set up clear markers and barriers as soon as you see that in your vision, that whether you've got a goose that you want to shoot or not, you don't. You just let it go. You know, better safe than sorry. And part of that setup, again, is to try to not cripple any geese also, you know, and get them to where we can recover all of them. And we've been fairly successful at doing that.
Okay. And with those, after the birds are shot, where are they disposed?
They're not disposed of. They're eaten, every single one of them. None of them are thrown away. As a matter of fact, and I know I've received a few phone calls, so I know that is some of the sentiment, you know, misconception, I would say, you know, in the community. I would never shoot anything that I'm not going to eat, and the people I hunt with are the same way. And so you can get, each hunter can get 5 geese. That's your limit for a day. So it doesn't matter how many are around, you shoot 5, you're done. And so most of the hunters will take those 5 and they'll clean them, you know, to eat later on. A lot of people make jerky out of them, whatever they want to do, you know, for deer camp later on. I do have calls. I had one guy call me and asked if his family could have a goose. I said, sure. I said, I'll give you one of mine, you know, providing I get one. Meet me at the fairgrounds when it's over and we'll give it to you. Last year, we had a fella and his son who actually had moved to Alpena, but they had been on a farm and they raised geese. So they were all excited, like, you know, hey, you think we could maybe get one? I go, just show up at this time. And so as they piled the geese in his car, he said, that's enough. Because somebody's got to clean them, right?
Yeah, that is true.
The year before that, I got a call from the Poes and KFC, and a lot of the area service organizations will have wild game dinners as a fundraiser. And for a lot of them, especially in the smaller communities like Poes, and it's the biggest fundraiser they have. Well, something happened to one of their freezers, so they had lost all their meat. So that year, my brothers and my son-in-law, we were hunting together, and Adam Paul, the city planner, so we just donated all our geese to them. So we were able to give them like 25 geese so that they could, have something for their wild game dinner and continue with that. But yeah, none of them are thrown away, and that's why we work so hard to recover them. We even have a city police officer will be patrolling in the river when we're hunting in case we wound one and it gets into the river so that he can recover it for us, make sure it doesn't get wasted.
We have more when we return with Don Gilman. Welcome back. Don, can you tell us what happened at the meeting this past week?
Certainly. At the last council meeting, it was put on the agenda. The city manager annually requests that I take a look at what the geese situation is around town, other than the ones that everybody obviously sees, at the band shell and stuff like that, and determine the need for a hunt and how much hunting do we need to do in regards to 1 day, 2 day, 3 days. And so I put that report together, and it goes into the council packets. I give the council a brief presentation. They can ask any questions that they want, and then they deliberate, and then they vote. And so this year, it wasn't real surprising. Mayor Pro Tem Johnson, runs the Humane Society too, as a president out there, and does a lot of good stuff. And she's always pretty much been opposed to the idea of the hunting. And not so much, I don't think, because it's in the city limits, as that she just, would rather not shoot any animals. And I get that. I can respect that. Fortunately for the hunt, the other three thought it was a good idea. So it passed 3-1. So this year we're having a hunt, and it's going to be 3 days. We're doing it on Thursdays, hoping maybe, instead of having to shut down the fairgrounds for half a day on Friday, Thursday will be a little easier for everybody because, the weekends and stuff, people are getting out and doing more things. And hopefully to throw the geese off their game a little bit. And we're going to go till 1 o'clock instead of, we always cut off at noon before. Some of the things, if you ever drive by the high school, the football fields, you'll see they have a real problem with geese too. And some of the things they did to deter that was put out cardboard silhouettes of dogs or coyotes or something along, a predator, a predator to a goose. And those are effective to a point, but you have to keep moving them around because geese, aren't that stupid, because they have to survive outside 24/7. So they learn what's the threat and what's not. And so if they see that silhouette just standing of a dog in the same place every day, pretty soon they realize, hey, that's no different than the goalpost on the football field, right? So it doesn't affect them. So you would have to expend funds or manpower to keep moving those things around. Now when you do that, it may keep the geese from landing there, but that just means they're going somewhere else. Yeah. And other methods that can be used to discourage the geese from being around would be like there's dogs that are trained, usually border collies. There's companies, they cost a lot of money, but they could come in once a day, once every 2 days, and keep chasing the geese off, basically harassing the geese and making it where they don't feel comfortable there anymore, and hopefully they'll go away. But when you make the geese, let's say if we did that at Bayview Beach and at the boat harbor, then we're going to make them go away from there, and maybe they're just going to go away down to Mishikiwas or back over to the football field. So inevitably, at the end of the day, the final solution to really control the population is to have the goose control hunt, where you're taking some of the geese out of the equation. If you don't, the ones that are born here, a lot of times they'll come right back here next spring. And so if they successfully have a nest, then there's going to be, anywhere from 6 to 12 little geese running around that are born here, and they home back in on the same area where they were born. So we're cutting some of those numbers down, And I love geese, not just because I hunt them, but I like watching them just like all animals. I like being outdoors and nature and all that. And I see the numbers dwindle because there's natural predators in the sanctuary. The pike and the snapping turtles and the muskies, they eat little geese. That's what they do. The eagles and the hawks that you see around, they catch some, and you'll see those numbers dwindle You know, you might see the brood and there's 8 of them, and then by the end of the summer they're down to 6 sometimes. And of course they get hit occasionally on Washington Street, walking across the street to the other people's backyards. And personally, I'd rather see a goose get shot by a hunter that's going to utilize the meat for its intended purpose, you know, and eat it as protein. But the future, well, that's a pretty good question, because I don't plan on being around much longer.
Yes, that was my next question. What do you project will happen in the future with these continued hunts? Do you think the hunts will continue? Do you think the numbers will decrease or increase?
There's no way to predict at this. You can't predict from one year to the next what the numbers of the geese are going to do, because it's affected by so many factors: weather, water levels, the amount of geese that came from this area the year before that survived, you know, because wherever they go, they still got to survive being there before they can even come back too. And you know, and when you get, a lot of them go to the Lansing, Grand Rapids area, Muskegon. There's some marshes there that don't freeze over, and they'll winter over there. And you know, down there they get hit by cars, they fly into high power lines, and whatever happens, you know, windmills and stuff. But I think that perceptions are going to change in the city of Alpena. I mean, I think, you know, I'm a baby boomer, so we're around and we got another 10 or 15 years, we're all going to be gone, and the millennials come up and younger generations, that I just think it's different, the way, how society, how the people in your town are raised. So what's totally acceptable to me, and it's unbelievable that somebody would care if somebody wanted to shoot a goose, you know, the same could be said for a younger person, 20, 30 years old, that never was around hunting. And is only, you know, wants to see things in their natural habitat the way they are without any interference. Even though the city of Alpena is certainly not a natural habitat for a Canadian goose. I mean, it's, like I said, it's artificially inflated because we have so much food. There's just so much grass for them to eat. You know, people take pride in it. It's not just overgrown field where there's nothing for them. It's nice looking grass, partly because my department makes sure everybody keeps their lawns cut good.
Yeah. Well, that is good to keep our city beautiful. Well, do you think there is a true resolution to this issue?
There's resolutions. I mean, I've looked at research. I saw a video. There was a drone that a fella had manufactured that he used at a golf course, and the golf course had like beautiful condominiums around a big lake. The lake was probably 3 acres. And I mean, it was from one end to the other end of that lake where there was geese, seagulls, ducks, all which make the same kind of mess. And this drone, when he flew it up, it kind of looked almost like a hawk. And it had a microphone in it, and it emitted noise like a hawk. And I mean, he flew that, where normally if you go down to the water and scare the geese up, they circle 3 times, they land right back down there. This thing cleared the area, man. I mean, those geese left, and they looked like they were heading south. They didn't want anything to do with that lake anymore. Again, depending on how that works within the city limits, how far are we getting them to go? But all those things cost money. In the city, we're just getting back, we've come out of some rough times, you know, financially, because of property tax declines and all that. So we look at the more economical things. So for a guy to go out with, for me, for a day, he has to buy a goose stamp, a state goose stamp, a state hunting license. He's going to buy a box of shells. He's going to have about $100 before he even shoots one time. And so you multiply that by 14 people, or 12, however many I'm going to have, and that's not passed on to the city. Those costs are absorbed by the guys. So, you know, there's lots of things you can do, but they all have a price tag. So in the future, I guess that what's going to depend is how much money are the citizens of Alpena willing to pay to get rid of a problem by another means.
Yeah. So a great conversation with you today. You've definitely educated us on what a goose hunt is and what can we expect here with the geese migration here in Alpena. So thank you for joining us. And thank you all for tuning in for this week's Insight.
Insights into Northeast Michigan is produced by WBKB News. If you have any comments, suggestions, or topics you would like to see on a future show, please email WBKB News. This has been a production of Thunder Bay Broadcasting Corporation. All rights reserved.